The silver serving tray slammed against his chest so hard that champagne glasses rattled. "Well?" the woman snapped, loud enough for half the ballroom to hear. "What are you waiting for? Those guests aren't going to serve themselves." 200 heads turned. Conversation stopped. Crystal glasses froze halfway to smiling lips. Standing beneath a ceiling of glittering chandeliers, Marcus Reed stared down at the heavy tray now balanced awkwardly in his hands. He said nothing. The woman rolled her eyes. "I swear they hire anybody these days." A few guests chuckled. One man raised his phone, recording what he thought was an incompetent waiter getting scolded. Marcus adjusted the tray before it slipped. The weight wasn't what bothered him. It was the memories. For just a second, he wasn't standing inside the luxurious Grand Astoria Hotel. He was 22 again, working double shifts, carrying trays exactly like this one, trying to earn enough money to buy diapers for his newborn daughter, trying to survive after burying his wife, trying not to break. "Move!" the event manager barked. "The east section. Now." Marcus lifted his eyes toward her. There wasn't hatred in them, only disappointment. She mistook it for obedience. "That's better," she muttered. "Some people only understand instructions." Laughter rippled across nearby tables. Marcus slowly turned. Every step echoed across polished marble floors. The ballroom was breathtaking. Gold-trimmed walls, fresh orchids imported from Singapore, an orchestra playing softly beneath chandeliers worth more than most houses. Every guest wore designer gowns and custom tuxedos. Every guest except him. His charcoal gray suit was perfectly tailored but intentionally simple. No luxury watch. No diamond cufflinks. No flashy logo. Just polished black shoes and a quiet confidence that nobody bothered to notice. Which was exactly why they underestimated him. As Marcus walked through the ballroom carrying the tray, whispers followed him. "Poor guy. He looks lost. Probably a temp. These hotels really need better staff." Marcus heard every word. He kept walking, because none of them knew the truth. None of them knew that before sunrise tomorrow, the Grand Astoria's future would rest entirely on one signature. His. Before we go back to where this all began, if stories about being underestimated hit something in you, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss where this one goes. And if you're already hooked, drop a like. It tells me to keep making these. Across the ballroom, 12-year-old Ava Monroe watched everything unfold. Unlike the other guests, she wasn't laughing. She frowned. Something about the man carrying the tray didn't make sense. He didn't walk like an employee. He didn't panic. He wasn't embarrassed. He walked with calm confidence, like someone who had absolutely nothing to prove. Her grandmother noticed her staring. "What is it, sweetheart?" Ava leaned closer. "Grandma, that man doesn't belong carrying trays." Her grandmother smiled politely. "How can you tell?" "I don't know. He just looks like someone important." Her grandmother patted her hand and went back to her conversation. Ava didn't. She kept watching him the way you watch something you can't quite explain, filing it away for later. Marcus carefully placed the tray onto a serving station. A young waiter rushed over. "I'm so sorry, sir." Marcus smiled. "No apology needed." The teenager blinked. "You're not upset?" Marcus looked around the room. "I've carried heavier things." The young waiter didn't understand. But Marcus did. He'd carried grief, debt, loneliness, fear. A sleeping little girl in his arms after nightmares. Compared to those, a serving tray weighed almost nothing. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He smiled before even looking. There was only one person who texted him this way. Emma Redhart. A selfie appeared. His 14-year-old daughter, grinning beside a half-finished volcano model covered in red paint. Don't laugh. I think I accidentally made the lava look like ketchup. Will you be home before I sleep? Marcus laughed quietly and typed back. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Save me some lava. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Promise? He didn't hesitate. Always. Marcus slipped the phone away. That single word wasn't just a promise. It was one he'd made 14 years earlier inside a hospital room, the night everything changed. Marcus stared at the word he'd just typed. Always. The ballroom seemed to disappear around him for a moment, because that single word carried 14 years of pain, sacrifice, and promises that no one in this room could ever understand. There had been a time when he almost couldn't keep it. 14 years earlier, rain hammered the roof of Mercy General Hospital as Marcus sat outside the intensive care unit with his face buried in his trembling hands. He was 24 years old. His shirt was stained with engine grease from the auto repair shop where he'd been working a double shift. He hadn't even had time to change before racing to the hospital. The doctor finally stepped through the doors. His expression told Marcus everything before he spoke.
I'm sorry.
2 words. That was all it took. Marcus felt the world collapse. His wife, Elena, was gone. Complications after childbirth. One moment she had been laughing, talking about baby names. The next, silence. The doctor gently placed a tiny pink blanket into Marcus's arms. Inside it was a sleeping baby girl. So, the doctor whispered, "Who's this beautiful little fighter?" Marcus looked down. The baby's tiny fingers wrapped around one of his. Something inside him refused to break. "My daughter." The doctor smiled sadly. "Have you chosen a name?" Marcus remembered Elena's words from only 2 days earlier. "If she's a girl, let's call her Emma. Because no matter what happens, I want her to grow up believing the world is full of hope." Marcus swallowed the lump in his throat. Emma. Life didn't become inspirational after that. It became brutal. Every morning began before sunrise. He worked at an auto garage until 4, delivered food until 8, cleaned office buildings overnight, then came home just in time to feed Emma before grabbing 3 hours of sleep. Some nights he was so exhausted he slept sitting on the floor beside her crib. When Emma cried, he cried too, quietly so she wouldn't hear. One winter afternoon, Marcus stopped inside a grocery store carrying Emma against his chest. She was barely 2 years old. He counted every dollar in his wallet. $28. Milk, bread, diapers. Something had to go back. He stood frozen. Emma reached for a box of cereal covered with cartoon bears. "Daddy." Marcus smiled painfully. "Not today, princess." A woman behind him sighed dramatically. "If you can't afford children." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Marcus heard enough. He quietly returned the cereal to the shelf, picked up the diapers, and walked away. Emma looked back at the cereal until it disappeared from sight. Marcus never forgot that look. That night, after Emma finally fell asleep, Marcus opened the old laptop Elena had bought from a pawn shop before they married. It barely worked. The keyboard missed letters. The screen flickered constantly, but it still turned on, and that was enough. Every night, after 3 jobs, after changing diapers, after washing bottles, Marcus taught himself software engineering. One online lesson at a time. One coding mistake at a time. One impossible dream at a time. People laughed. "You think you're going to become some tech millionaire?" Marcus never argued. He just kept learning. 3 years later, Emma was coloring dinosaurs on the apartment floor when Marcus's phone rang. A known number. He almost ignored it. "Mr. Reed." "Yes." "This is Daniel Foster from Horizon Ventures." Marcus froze. His heart started racing. He recognized the company immediately. They had rejected hundreds of startups. "We've reviewed your presentation." Marcus held his breath. We'd like to discuss investing. His knees nearly gave out. Emma looked up. Daddy. Marcus couldn't speak. Tears filled his eyes. Finally, he whispered, "We did it." Emma giggled. "We did what?" Marcus lifted her into the air. "We're going to have a better life." Years passed. That tiny apartment became a beautiful home. The rusty pickup truck became a modest sedan. The sleepless father became the founder of Reed Technologies, one of the fastest-growing artificial intelligence companies in America. Yet Marcus never changed. Every Friday he still picked Emma up from school himself. Every Saturday they still made pancakes together. Every Sunday movie night. No board meetings. No investors. No exceptions. His assistant once asked, "Sir, why don't you hire a chauffeur?" Marcus smiled. "Because one day my daughter won't ask me to drive her anymore." "Dad," Emma asked one Saturday morning, "can I ask you something?" Marcus flipped another pancake. "Always. Why don't you wear expensive watches like the other billionaires on TV?" Marcus laughed. "Come here." She climbed onto the kitchen stool. He held up his wrist. "What do you see?" "Nothing." "Exactly." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photograph. It showed a younger Marcus holding a baby outside a tiny apartment. "You see this picture? That day I had exactly $11. But I also had you." He smiled softly. "So tell me, who was richer?" Emma thought for a moment. "The man in the picture." Marcus grinned. "Exactly." His phone buzzed again. Present day, back inside the ballroom. "David Chin. Where are you?" "We're introducing you in 10 minutes. Marcus looked across the room. The woman who had shoved the tray into his hands was laughing with another employee. She hadn't recognized him. Not once. He typed a simple reply. "Give me 5 more minutes." David answered immediately. "Everything okay?" Marcus looked around the ballroom one more time. Executives, politicians, celebrities, people who believed status was something you wore. Then he noticed something else. Near one of the dessert tables, an elderly janitor struggled to push a heavy cleaning cart over the thick carpet. Dozens of wealthy guests walked right past him. Nobody offered to help. Marcus quietly crossed the room. Without saying a word, he placed both hands on the cart. The janitor looked surprised. "Oh, thank you, sir." Marcus smiled. "We all need a hand sometimes." Neither man noticed the event manager who had humiliated Marcus, watching from across the room. She frowned. "There he goes again," she muttered. "Helping the staff instead of acting like a guest. I knew he didn't belong here." Little did she know, in less than 5 minutes, the entire ballroom would discover exactly who belonged there. The old man's gray uniform hung loosely from his thin shoulders. His hands shook as he pushed the overloaded cart across the thick Persian carpet. Every guest simply stepped around him. Some frowned. Others acted as though he didn't exist. Marcus grabbed one side of the cart. "Here." The old man looked startled. "Oh, thank you." Marcus smiled. "My pleasure." The janitor chuckled. "You don't look like the kind of man who usually helps people like me." Marcus looked him in the eyes. "My father was a janitor." The old man's expression softened. "So was I." Marcus nodded. "Then you know something most people in this room don't." "What's that?" "Every building shines because someone nobody notices cleans it." The old man laughed. "I like you." Marcus smiled. "I hope you still do in about 10 minutes. The janitor frowned, but before he could ask what Marcus meant, Marcus had already walked away. Across the ballroom, the event manager, Vanessa Caldwell, watched him with growing irritation. She had managed luxury galas for nearly 15 years and prided herself on reading people within seconds. She had already decided exactly who Marcus was, A contractor, temporary staff, someone who wandered where he shouldn't. She turned toward another waitress. Keep an eye on that guy. The one in the gray suit? Vanessa nodded. He keeps talking to employees instead of guests. He probably thinks nobody notices. I thought he looked kind of important, the waitress said, shrugging. Vanessa laughed. Important? People with real money don't dress like that. Marcus overheard every word. He didn't react. Instead, he walked toward the refreshment table. A young waiter accidentally bumped into him. The tray tipped. Champagne splashed across Marcus's jacket. The teenager turned pale. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. Marcus gently steadied the tray before it fell. It's all right. The young man's hands were trembling. I've only worked here 3 weeks. They're going to fire me. Marcus took a napkin and calmly wiped his sleeve. What's your name? Ethan. You in school? Ethan nodded. Community college. What are you studying? Computer engineering. I can't really afford it, so I'm working nights. Marcus smiled and reached into his pocket, pulling out a business card. No logo. Just a phone number. If you ever need an internship, call me. Ethan stared at the card. Really? Marcus winked. You'll have to earn it. Vanessa saw the entire exchange, and her jaw tightened. Unbelievable. She marched across the ballroom. You. Marcus turned politely. Yes. She pointed toward the stain on his jacket. Now look what you've done. It was an accident. It wouldn't have happened if you weren't standing around chatting. Nearby conversations began to quiet. People sensed drama. Vanessa stepped closer. If you want to keep working tonight, you'll stop acting like a guest. Marcus blinked.
I'm sorry.
I've managed enough events to recognize lazy staff. You've spent half the evening talking instead of working. A businessman nearby chuckled. Vanessa kept going, louder now, playing to the room. You know what your problem is? You think because you're wearing a nice suit, people won't notice you're pretending. A few guests laughed. Someone whispered, she's got him figured out. Marcus looked around the ballroom. More than 200 guests. Almost every eye had drifted toward them. The humiliation was becoming public. Exactly what Vanessa wanted. She reached behind a serving station and pulled out another silver tray, this one loaded with desserts, and shoved it toward Marcus without asking. Take these to table 7. Marcus caught the heavy tray before it tipped. Vanessa crossed her arms. Well, he looked at the tray, then back at her, and asked very quietly, May I ask you something? She sighed dramatically. What? If I were actually a guest, what would you say? Vanessa laughed.
Ide apologiza.
The ballroom laughed with her. Marcus nodded slowly. I see. She mistook his calmness for defeat. You know, she added loudly, my father always told me something. If you want respect, earn it. Marcus smiled. My father taught me something too. And what's that? He shifted the tray comfortably. He said the easiest way to discover someone's character is to give them power over a stranger. For the first time, Vanessa had no comeback. She rolled her eyes. Just do your job. Marcus inclined his head politely. As you wish. He turned and walked away carrying the desserts. The crowd laughed again. Some even applauded Vanessa. None of them noticed David Chun, on the opposite side of the ballroom, watching everything, his face gone pale. He reached for his phone. Security. 3 members of Marcus's executive protection team looked toward him. David raised one finger and they started walking. Marcus saw them. Almost invisibly, he shook his head once. Stop. The guards froze. David couldn't believe it. Marcus wasn't angry, wasn't embarrassed. He was waiting, because tonight had never been about proving who he was. It was about discovering who everyone else really was. David slipped his phone back into his pocket, his heart pounding, as the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, if everyone could please take their seats. The evening's main presentation is about to begin. Marcus gently placed the dessert tray onto table 7. A little girl sitting beside her parents smiled up at him. "Thank you, mister." Marcus smiled back. "You're very welcome," she whispered. "I like your suit." Marcus laughed softly. "It's my favorite. I think you're important." Her mother looked embarrassed. "Emily, she's very kind," Marcus said. As he turned toward the stage, he heard Vanessa behind him. "Finally, at least he's doing something useful." Marcus stopped walking. Not because of her words, because David had just stepped onto the stage. And in David's hand was the envelope containing the contract worth $480 million. Only one person in the room had the authority to sign it. And almost no one realized that the man they'd spent the evening treating like a servant was about to be introduced to the world. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies smiled as the final conversations faded into silence. "What an extraordinary evening." Soft applause echoed across the ballroom. Behind him, a massive screen illuminated the room with one elegant sentence. "The Elena Reed Foundation. Changing tomorrow one dream at a time." Marcus looked up at the screen. His chest tightened. Every time he saw Elena's name, it felt as though she was still walking beside him, not as a memory, but as a promise. David Chen stepped onto the stage. The applause grew louder. Everyone in the business world knew David. He had helped build Reed Technologies from a tiny startup into one of America's most respected companies. He adjusted the microphone. "Good evening. Tonight isn't about business. It isn't about profit. It isn't even about technology." He paused. "It's about one woman." The screen changed. A photograph appeared. Marcus and Elena, much younger, standing inside a cramped garage beside 2 folding tables and a whiteboard covered with equations. Several guests smiled. 14 years ago, 2 people chased an impossible dream. They had almost no money, no investors, no connections. They only had faith. Another picture appeared. Marcus holding baby Emma while typing on an old laptop. The ballroom grew quiet. "Every company has a beginning," David said. "Ours began with a father who refused to quit." Marcus lowered his eyes. He hated attention. Near the back of the ballroom, Vanessa folded her arms impatiently. "When are they bringing out the CEO? I've heard he's worth almost $9 billion. Another employee nodded. "They say he owns half the hotel chain." Vanessa glanced around the VIP tables. "I wonder which one he is." David continued. "There are thousands of CEOs, hundreds of billionaires. But only one man I know who still leaves work every Friday at 3 o'clock because his daughter likes homemade pancakes." Soft laughter drifted through the audience. Marcus smiled to himself. Emma would laugh when she heard that. David reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I've been asked to read something tonight. It's a letter. It was written 14 years ago by Elena Reed." Marcus's heart stopped. He hadn't known David still had it. David unfolded the paper carefully, and his voice grew softer. "If you're hearing this, then I'm probably gone." The ballroom became completely silent. "Marcus, I know what you're going to do. You're going to work too hard. You're going to forget to sleep. You're going to tell Emma everything is okay even when it isn't." Marcus closed his eyes. That sounded exactly like Elena. "Promise me one thing. If success ever comes, don't let it change the man I fell in love with. Stay kind, especially when people don't deserve it." Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. Across the ballroom, even Vanessa had stopped moving. She listened without realizing why. David folded the letter. I think he kept that promise. The room erupted into applause, long and genuine. David waited, then smiled. If you've got chills right now, that's your sign to hit like. And if you've ever been the one nobody noticed until it was too late, tell me in the comments. I read every one. And now, I'd like everyone to meet the man who made Elena's final dream possible. More applause. Guests craned their necks toward the VIP section. Several executives straightened their jackets. One investor even stood halfway, convinced the introduction was meant for him. David's voice echoed through every speaker. Marcus, would you please join me? Nothing happened. People looked toward the stage, then toward the front tables. Confused whispers spread. Where is he? Did he leave? Which one is Marcus? David smiled.
No.
Not over there. He pointed toward the center of the ballroom, and a single spotlight switched on. It landed on Marcus, standing quietly beside table 7, the same table where he had just served dessert. The room froze. A champagne glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered across the marble floor. Nobody looked. Every pair of eyes remained fixed on Marcus. Near the back, Ava Monroe grabbed her grandmother's arm. I told you, she whispered. I told you he looked important. Her grandmother said nothing at all, too stunned to answer, and Ava just watched, quietly proud of a feeling she hadn't been able to name an hour ago. Vanessa stared at him, then at David, then back again. No, she whispered.
No.
Marcus slowly adjusted his jacket, buttoned it, straightened the sleeve still stained with champagne. Then he calmly walked toward the stage. Nobody spoke. The silence was almost frightening. As Marcus passed each table, guests instinctively stood, one after another, until all 200 people were on their feet. The same people who had laughed less than 10 minutes earlier. The businessman who had recorded him carrying the tray quietly lowered his phone, his face going pale. The woman who had whispered, "Poor guy," covered her mouth. Vanessa couldn't breathe. Her knees weakened. Her mind replayed every word she'd spoken. People like you, do your job, earn respect, and she suddenly understood. She hadn't humiliated a waiter. She had humiliated the man whose company had booked the entire gala. The man donating $100 million. The man deciding whether the Grand Astoria remained the official venue for every Reed Technologies event to come. Her future had just collapsed, and she knew it before anyone said a word. Marcus reached the stage. David greeted him with a quiet smile. You okay? I am now. I wanted security to stop it. I know. Why didn't you let me? Marcus looked across the silent ballroom, and for a moment something harder passed behind his eyes. A small, human flicker of satisfaction at watching Vanessa's certainty crumble in real time. He let himself feel it. Then he set it down, the same way he'd learned to set down every grudge he could have carried out of that grocery store 12 years ago. Because I needed to know, he said. Know what? Who people become when they think no one important is watching. David nodded. He understood. Marcus stepped behind the microphone. He didn't speak immediately. He simply looked across the room. 200 faces, some ashamed, some terrified, some unable to meet his eyes, and smiled gently. Good evening. My name is Marcus Reed. I believe we've already met. A few nervous laughs escaped before disappearing almost instantly. You know, when I was 24 years old, I actually was a waiter. I carried trays, cleaned tables, washed dishes, and every night I hurried home because a little girl was waiting for her father. He paused. I learned something during those years. The easiest job in the world is serving food. The hardest is serving people with kindness. The ballroom remained silent. Marcus looked toward the staff members standing along the walls, waiters, housekeepers, dishwashers, janitors, valet attendants. I want every employee in this room to stand. They exchanged uncertain looks. Vanessa frowned. Slowly, every member of the hotel staff stood. Marcus smiled warmly. Let's give them the applause they deserve. For a second, nobody moved. Then David began clapping. One executive joined him, then another, and within moments the entire ballroom erupted into applause. Not for Marcus, but for the people who had been invisible all evening. Several housekeepers wiped away tears. The elderly janitor Marcus had helped lowered his head. Overcome, Marcus waited until the applause faded. Then his expression turned serious. There is, however, one final matter we need to discuss. His eyes slowly found Vanessa, and the room held its breath. The applause slowly faded. No one sat down. 200 guests remained standing, their eyes fixed on Marcus Reed. The ballroom had never felt so quiet. Marcus rested both hands on the podium. There is one final matter we need to discuss. His gaze settled on Vanessa. She felt her stomach drop. For the first time that evening, she understood what real fear felt like. Not the fear of losing a job, but the fear of realizing exactly who you had become. "Miss," he said, looking toward her name badge. "Vanessa Caldwell, would you please join me on stage?" A gasp swept across the ballroom. Vanessa couldn't move. Her legs felt frozen. The hotel's general manager leaned toward her. "You need to go." She swallowed hard and took the longest walk of her life, every step heavier than the last, guests quietly stepping aside as she passed. Minutes earlier, those same people had laughed with her. Now not one of them would meet her eyes. She climbed the steps. Marcus offered his hand to help her up. She hesitated before accepting it. Even now, after everything, he treated her with respect. That hurt more than any insult could have. Marcus faced the audience. "I'd like to tell you all something." He turned slightly toward Vanessa. "When I walked into this hotel tonight, I wasn't looking for perfection. I wasn't testing customer service. I wasn't even looking for mistakes." He paused. "I was looking for character." Silence. "My company is preparing to sign a 10-year hospitality partnership." The screen behind him changed. A number appeared, $480 million. A collective gasp filled the ballroom. "Our events over the next decade will create thousands of hotel bookings, millions in local business, and thousands of jobs. I wanted to know who deserved that opportunity." The hotel owner, Richard Langston, suddenly stood, his face gone pale. "Mr. Reed, I assure you, this is not who we are." Marcus nodded politely. "I believe you." Richard looked relieved. Then Marcus continued. "But culture isn't measured by mission statements. It's measured by ordinary moments, when no cameras are watching, when no titles are involved, when someone believes the person standing in front of them has nothing to offer." The relief disappeared from Richard's face. Marcus turned back to Vanessa. "You believed I was an employee." "Yes." "You believed I had no influence." "Yes." "You believed I wasn't important." Tears rolled down her face. "Yes." Marcus nodded. "So tell me, if I had actually been a waiter, would I have deserved to be treated that way?" Vanessa couldn't answer. Marcus waited. Finally she whispered, "No." He nodded once.
No.
She wiped her eyes. "I judged you. I judged your clothes. I judged the fact that you were standing alone. I didn't see a person. I saw someone I thought was beneath me." The ballroom remained silent. "I've replayed every word I said. If I could take them back, I would, but I can't. So, I'm sorry. It wasn't polished. It wasn't rehearsed. It was real." Marcus looked toward the audience. Forgiveness is easy to talk about. It's much harder to practice. He stepped away from the podium. "When I was 26, I lost my wife. I was raising a little girl by myself. I worked as a waiter. I cleaned offices. I washed dishes. I parked cars. I carried trays. His voice never shook. But there was one thing I prayed every night, that no one would ever make my daughter feel small simply because of the clothes she wore or the work she did. Several guests quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Marcus turned toward the hotel staff lined against the walls. I want every waiter, every housekeeper, every janitor, every dishwasher to hear me. There is dignity in honest work. You are not invisible. You are not less important. And you never have been. The employees burst into applause. Many were crying openly now. Even some of the guests joined them. Richard Langston slowly approached the stage. Mr. Reed, I know this contract is yours to award. I also know we failed tonight. If you decide another hotel deserves your business, I'll understand. The ballroom held its breath. Marcus looked toward David, who simply nodded. The decision was Marcus's alone. Marcus returned to the microphone. I have made my decision. Silence. Every camera in the room pointed toward him. Vanessa closed her eyes. Richard held his breath. Marcus smiled gently. The contract will not be signed tonight. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. Richard lowered his head. Vanessa quietly began to cry. But Marcus wasn't finished. Because contracts should never be signed immediately after emotional moments. Confused murmurs spread. My company will spend the next 90 days visiting every hotel competing for this partnership. We'll eat in their restaurants. We'll stay in their rooms. But more importantly, we'll speak with the people nobody usually asks, the dishwashers, the cleaners, the security guards, the night staff, the interns, because they know the true culture of a company. Richard slowly looked back up. If the Grand Astoria proves that tonight was an exception, not a habit, you'll still have every opportunity to earn our business. Hope returned to his face. Marcus turned toward Vanessa one final time. As for you, she braced herself. I cannot decide whether you remain employed. That decision belongs to your employer. Richard nodded. But I can decide one thing. Everyone leaned forward. If you're willing, I'd like you to spend the next year leading every employee orientation. Vanessa blinked. What? I want every new employee to hear your story. I want them to understand how easy it is to judge someone and how dangerous that becomes. Tears streamed down her face. You'd trust me with that? Marcus smiled.
No.
A long pause. I'd trust the person you're capable of becoming. The room erupted into applause, not because justice had been avoided, but because grace had been chosen without ignoring accountability. As the evening came to an end, Marcus quietly slipped out of the ballroom through a side entrance.
No reporters. No cameras.
Just one waiting car. Near the doors, Ava caught his eye for half a second. He gave her a small, knowing nod, as if to say she'd been right all along. She grinned and elbowed her grandmother, who was still too stunned to speak. His phone buzzed. Emma Redhart, did you survive your boring work dinner? Faced with tears of joy, Marcus laughed and replied, barely. Did you miss me? Every minute. Hurry home. The volcano exploded without you. Marcus looked up at the night sky. For everyone else, tonight had been about a billionaire. For him, it had always been about getting home before his daughter fell asleep. He climbed into the car. As the driver pulled away, Marcus looked back once at the glowing lights of the Grand Astoria, then whispered the words that had guided every decision he'd made since the day he lost Elena. Character is who you are when no one thinks you matter. The city lights blurred past the window as he headed home, not as the richest man in the room, but as the father his daughter was waiting for. If this story moved you, that's exactly why I make them. Subscribe if you're new here. Ring the notification bell so you catch the next one the moment it drops. Drop a comment telling me which part hit hardest, and hit like before you go. I'll see you in the next story.